We didn't get a chance really to talk about either the last regular season weekend of Super Rugby, which did have one of my favourite moments, which was the Sharks' late try to make the playoffs.
Yes.
In that what was a great game against the Stormers, if low scoring, there was a lot of heart and fight going on there, and the Sharks finding that killer play to get into the playoffs. It was one of my moments of the season, and it's a shame we didn't get to
address
look back on it. Yeah.
But sure, now we can remedy that, because the Sharks were featured and were involved, and just fell ultimately short to what is quite a very physical and strong looking Brumbies side that are going to go rolling on as well.
That's right, and that game Jaguares against Brumbies is on it tonight, Irish time, Friday evening, I guess Kiwi time. That's going to be Saturday morning.
Yeah.
The first of the semi-finals, and just before we preview that, we will look back at the two quarters, starting with that Brumbies Sharks game. 38-13 in the end.
It was more than an arm's length. It was comfortable enough for them.
It was. I mean, the Sharks, they definitely let themselves down a little bit, especially in the early plays. But I felt like a lot of it was just really good homework, really good coaching, and super physicality from the Brumbies. They had isolated the fact that the Sharks, who have had a good D all year, in and around the fringes, used their props a lot to cover that space, and they just exploited it with some
time and time again. That exact gap
balls
kept appearing.
The little Joe Schmidt move where the scrum half runs a dummy loop against the first receiver, and he dummies the ball and plays it back to someone coming from the sort of blind spot behind the ruck. And through the space they went time and time again, and the Sharks were flat-footed and quite slow to react. And they didn't really enter the game before they were about 24-6 down, and then for them that's just too late. That's not their game.
Not at all. They kind of prefer to be forerunners. Also prefer to be the more physical side most often, which is same for anyone. But the Brumbies impressed me with that display of like you say, good tactics in terms of targeting that area, but also massive physicality. I've thought that all year though, and that's always like it feels anomalous when you're looking at some of the Brumbies games and thinking they're a bit of a stuttery stylistic team, and looking at some of the other Aussie teams in their conference going like, how is it they always kind of distill up to the top of the pot? And we were alluding to some of it earlier, the fact that in every highlights packages, in every highlights package, they feature a maul try or some kind of thing. Their physicality is not to be dismissed.
Their second rows are significantly better than anything else offered in Australia right now. For sure. Which outside of the Exiles. But like Van Heerden for the Sharks, who had been such a big monster from the second row, was working his socks off, but every time he tried to carry, he was getting driven backwards and and that pack just got dominated, and it happened all day. And then even with Kerwin Bosch back and trying things, the Brumbies defence really did shut them down. They prevented them from getting go forward ball in and around the fringes, and then they kept their width really well. So Pimpy and then Cozy were frozen out of the game in an attacking sense, and they really never got space to operate. And that's where the Sharks' danger is. They like to get a bit of go forward and then get it into the hands of those wingers, and that's where the danger comes from. They never got a chance.
Very capable shutout job from the Brumbies, but it'll be a different task at hand in this one, considering they're heading to Buenos Aires to take on the high-flying Jags, who are not shorn for physicality anyway, but it's not their game, as their game isn't as focused on that at all as the Sharks. And just even tempo wise, it'll be interesting to see how these two sides match up in finals footy, because the Jags themselves had been near flawless all season, and it was a bit
certainly in the latter half
of the season pretty much, and it was a stuttering performance against admittedly quite a dangerous Chiefs, but it's like in the context of the performance, they were both kind of cancelling each other out. What two teams that had been in the weeks previously like the highlights package of Super Rugby for the last few games, running in tries from everywhere, amazing stuff. But when it comes to finals, things get a little tighter, which is why, like in the context of the Jags, like your head could say, looking at just the Jags highlights all year, and even in that game, they had some wonderful plays to get themselves out of trouble. And maybe their strike rate could prove too much for the Brumbies, and in Buenos Aires. But alternatively, looking at how physical those Brumbies can be, you could cause problems for this Jags outfit if they stop their go forward, and then suddenly the passes aren't sticking one or two, and the crowd gets detached.
Absolutely, one of the massive blows for the Brumbies is that in that Sharks game, Pete Samu, who has been such a weapon for them, is injured and is gone. And that's obviously a massive concern. But just wrapping up the Shark season, they finished up. They were well beaten in terms of test selection, though, the two centres did themselves no harm at all. I thought even in that losing effort, and Esterhuizen were very great and had some slick plays and slick touches.
That wasn't where the gaps came. It was, as you say, it was just around the ruck that they kept time and time again.
Indeed. Some of those forwards will have hurt their chances, but I think they've definitely for Springbok selection, the likes of Am is definitely in, Esterhuizen's probably in, Kerwin Bosch is going to be in, pushing for 15 or 10 in that context, and Mapimpi still very much in the mix, but Nkosi probably has hurt himself in recent weeks just for some loose defending.
Yeah, even in the week prior against
the Stormers.
The Stormers, he had a couple of ropey plays in the second half. It was excellent in the first half, but a couple of loose plays in the second half defensively. So I don't know.
With the high bar on wingers.
This is it. Yeah, they have so many wingers to pick from, and you can come just in South Africa they do, and then you can go Northern Hemisphere. You have your Cheslin Colbys who are there as well. So it's a tough spot to get into. So any weak or slightly weak kind of performance is going to hurt.
But I will say, Rhino Smith, who was so good against the Stormers, really changed the game for them from 23. He came on and was everywhere and set up that Nathaniel Am try at the end of the match. He was benched again, and perhaps there was an error in that, just in terms of the little bit of spark and a little bit of magic that the Sharks were missing. They probably could have used starting him. True. But those are reflections for
another year now.
Robert Dupree and the boys to make, and it'll be. I'm not sure if the coach will still be there next year, but it's a summer of reflection, and
there will be a Curry Cup, isn't there? So
that's right. But all of those boys are going to be in Bok camp. I don't think too many of the test players will be playing.
So the Sharks overall did have a great season to get as far as they did. I think ultimately they proved themselves. What we've been touting them for is just the bit of grit and heart that they do show is always admirable, and even if it's up in the face of a superior team sometimes, and just the way this Brumbies team came to play, but also matched up physically and isolated one weakness repeatedly.
And just as up for a playoff game as I've seen an Aussie team in a good long while.
Yeah, no, it was really encouraging. I'd say Cheika was very encouraged by watching that game, because like looking at some of the things like the Taz last regular season game and just the tame nature of it all. Obviously nothing to play for, but still no fun to be shipping a load of points, and then the Rebels
66
a few weeks prior, and it's all, where do you look to find your players? They're looking everywhere, it seems, but it's this Brumbies outfit has a bit of grit to them. Their pack is encouraging, because a kind of a trait in recent Australian rugby on an international and club level is just little soft lines throughout the team. There's always one or two jerseys that are near vacant in the context of a pack or something. Yeah. And to not have that in this outfit, it's really good, and I give them every chance going to Buenos Aires, to be honest, because I was saying all year that I think the Jags are excellent, and this year I'd love if the story of this year in Super Rugby is that the Jags win out, and it's like the first time ever the Jags win Super Rugby would be tremendous. But all that being said, it's like throughout the regular season you're thinking like, what are they going to look like come playoffs? And they have everything lined up for them. The stars have aligned. They're in Buenos Aires this week as well as last. It was only the Buenos Aires factor that I really credit with them seeing off the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was very nervy, very stuttery. You'd hope that maybe that's out of their system now.
Could be.
But it was definitely an unconvincing playoff performance, and the Chiefs were kicking their way to victory. I think actually the loss of Debrasini on about 46 minutes when he went down to injury and Marty McKenzie came on, and they never quite got back what they had with Weber and Debrasini, really did help the Jags. And while it was classy, the tries that they found were classy and did get them out of jail. They were very, very close to losing that game against a Chiefs side that wasn't really doing much, just taking their threes when they were there, and Chiefs weren't reinventing the wheel. They weren't overly physical. They were just in the game and staying in the game because the Jags weren't putting them away. Yeah. So that'll be a massive concern. So they're going to have to definitely raise their game.
It's true. It's funny how often that happens though. Two sides with a reputation for attack and flair and pace end up playing out quite a nervy, stuttering, stop-start kind of game. And it's interesting that does kind of repeat itself. This week's one against the Brumbies feels more like a clash of styles in terms of two different ways of playing the game. So
there's no question. Like the Brumbies' defence was good against the slow, physical Sharks. They out-physicaled them, but the Jags are going to attack with pace,
much more pace, and probably much more depth as well. Like they don't mind going back to go forward or back to go wide and quickly, and they don't mind towing the ball through as well. And those wingers, to be fair, like Henry Spate and the like, they're huge physical units. On the turn, probably not the quickest, so things like little toe pokes through if they're too high in the line could be alarm bells ringing. Basically, if they manage to get pace on the ball, if the Brumbies back row don't slow them down enough and allow that Jags kind of just engine to get rolling and get purring, it could be very hard for them to contain, particularly with that Buenos Aires crowd.
There isn't a side in Super Rugby that can stop the Jags when they hit their straps. When they really do hit flow, they're very, very nigh on impossible to defend against for a Super Rugby side. So the Brumbies have got to find ways of preventing that from happening, exploiting ill discipline. Discipline's going to be massive. The Jags gave away a load of soft penalties last week. Soft penalties are maul tries against the Brumbies. And that's
discipline will be key because the
Brumbies
are no strangers to silly penalties to give away as well. So like it'll depend on the heat of the moment and who's going to actually kind of cope with that better and be calm.
Like, when you're talking about Lavanini's job, like he's a penalty machine and he's up against Sam Carter and Rory Arnold who've been so good. Like that's definitely a danger.
That is a recipe for unraveling in a Jags jersey, same as it is in an Argentinian jersey. You've seen that a lot. Lavanini being 4 or 5 penalties in around a 10-minute period, and suddenly the game's getting away from you. Like that's not an uncommon picture. I've definitely seen it before.
The hope for the Brumbies.
That is what they'll be targeting. For sure. But obviously, like the Jags will be trying to make it not about that at all. Make it about pace. Make it about width. Make it just a game of a shootout. Essentially, is what they want to be making it. Try. Because if that is the framework of this game, they will win that game against the Brumbies.
Certainly,
100%. Like they're better equipped.
Pete Samuel's Brumbies.
Indeed, Well, like even with Pete Samuel, that's never been the Brumbies game. The Brumbies lose those shootout games to their Australian opposition.
Well, they do stay in them with some maul tries.
They do.
If you give them penalties in your half, they're going to make a maul try of it. So you have to be careful.
It's always true.
But for sure, it's a curious game. It is a curious clash of styles. I can see both outcomes happening. I've actually veered back and forth in the week, but I think probably the Jags just
home advantage should be telling maybe in the difference. Like the Brumbies, I do think, as much as that is to their great credit, I do think they're quite a limited side ultimately. Overall, I think they're missing
Lealafano at 10 still has his weaknesses.
Things like that that when games get tight, I don't necessarily back them to be the ones in finals footy to break it up and make a magic play happen. Whereas with the Jags, I always bank on that capacity that even if it's going horrendously wrong, you could see a world either try any second. And I'm going to back that as coupled with the home advantage factor to see the Jags through. Coupled with this season, it feels like it's in World Cup year. It's obviously Argentina, sleeping giant that comes out every 4 years. I think it's time they saw a Super Rugby final. To be honest, I think they're good enough value for it. And looking on the evidence of the season so far, I think no more deserving finalists.
Certainly, if it's to beat the Crusaders in Christchurch, the Jags are a better chance of making a game of it than the Brumbies would
for
be.
Sure. Like that would be a foregone conclusion.
Like the Brumbies would be coming off a week, at home against the Sharks, which they did the job, but then going away to Buenos Aires, and if they get that done, and then going to Christchurch the next week, that's just too much travel.
The Brumbies and their maul try tendency and their physicality is great in general throughout the regular Super Rugby calendar for getting yourself more wins than your list.
Those weaknesses in most of the other teams.
Like you go to the Sunwolves, your hooker's going to get a hat trick from maul tries, that kind of way. But like against a side that is as physical as the Crusaders, but also as detail oriented and just very to the letter of what they're trying to do, and it's all based off a physical platform as well. They just don't really match up very well against them, particularly not in Christchurch. But then that's the same is true for most teams in this competition. Pretty much every team in this competition doesn't like going to Christchurch.
So we're gonna move on then. That's that game you're calling it.
I'm calling Jags,
and I'll say Jags.
It's time. It's time that the Jags got through, and I hope they win the whole thing.
I really do. The other semi, which has been dubbed by some writer in Rugby Pass who I won't name because I can't remember his name.
No, that's a good reason.
Is Crusaders Hurricane. They've dubbed Hurricanes the Kiwi Derby. They've dubbed the real final. I don't know about that.
Yeah, my people's final is Crusaders Jags, baby. But the Hurricanes looked very good last week. They really did. I thought.
Yeah, the Canes played a serious rip roar of a semi final against the Bulls, and the Bulls did themselves credit that the Sharks couldn't say they did. They stepped up in a big way. Haven't us been deriding them the whole time? They came back. They looked like when the Canes took a 24-7 lead, and it looked like a foregone conclusion. But the Bulls really did pull out some classy plays.
That's true. Yeah, no, there's still no denying. Like when Pollard hits his straps, and when Creel's as robust as he was on that day, and he's going forward all the time. And actually, the other
Creel, Jesse Creel,
is like just taking it to the line the whole time, and then their collision zone. They were making such massive driving back.
I thought Snyman was outstanding.
Awesome. And some in the second half when they really did need to score, he was just throwing all kinds of offloads. Thank goodness his players were actually catching them, because you've seen that a lot in Bulls things where this is just where loose drops come from, and there still were a few of them. There still are some tendencies in the Bulls even that do annoy me. Like there are some loose elements to their
even
play
the
that cost them.
Drop from Hendricks.
But Hendricks himself had a great game. I wouldn't. He's still in credit for the performance overall. But it is just what I was going to say is, like, when the Bulls fire like they did, there's no denying that they are the best team in South Africa.
They're the closest. They're the closest thing to the Springboks that South African domestic rugby has. Now it's still very much knockoff discount, not the real
Springboks at all. And just some of the looseness and some of the plays, like even that TJ break. That was like a little, like out of his own 22, and it's just one of those moments where they just all collectively switch off for a second. But TJ's not switched off, and he's gone.
Speckman nearly scored a great try in the corner, and he just got milled into touch, and then there was a pressured line out 5, and TJ just broke away, gave them huge relief. But that second Hendricks try was one of the best tries of the season, and it does deserve merit and credit, and the difference was certainly not Bowden Barrett from our Canes perspective, because Pollard was the best 10 on the pitch
by far,
and enters that best 10 in the world conversation.
Oh, he does. He's always
some there. But there's so many of them now. And
he's literally bullish, and it's a grand thing. Like his kicking was on point from all over, and even the Kiwi commentators talking about how far he was pulling back those touchline kicks on the edge after tries. He's pulling them way back to past the 22 to widen the angle, but he can kick it that far.
Exactly. So it was no issue for him.
No problem at all. My issue still remains with the Bulls that season wide, like they had to go and play the Canes away from home because of
their regular season.
They're losing against teams they have no right to lose against by scorelines and margins that are so mental, and like we were speculating, is some of it travel, is some of it something else, but we still stand by your little thesis that like the Sharks are our favourite South African team.
Yes.
Because just the way they play the game, the way they never say die, no matter what the circumstance, even when they're often outmatched.
But the Bulls get a lot of credit for how they played that game.
Yeah.
And from a Canes perspective, in terms of your difference makers, you did have Barrett, and you did have the Barrett brother axis. Ben Lam did get a try. But I think the real difference makers there, like Dane Coles was frozen out a bit, but he's still obviously a serious weapon. But it was Artie Sevilla at 7 really doing a serious job.
Game-winning steal at the very end as well. But
TJ, how good are you looking?
You're talking about a massive difference between those two sides. The Bulls had very little to offer from 9.
Yeah,
very little.
Both lines were lacking.
Yeah,
and
comparatively, when you have TJ doing that, like considering how backwards the scrum was going, and some of the exits he pulled off scrum, as well as that line out one, it's just like the pack was so under pressure that it's amazing that he had as good a game as he did. Because
Aaron Smith better watch his back.
I've always suspected that TJ is slightly the better player of those two, because I think there's
Aaron Smith has his merits too.
Aaron Smith has his merits when all things are going well and you just want quick ball. Aaron Smith is slightly tidier in his passing game than TJ. But Aaron Smith can be rattled by a pack like this. Like if the scrum was being as demolished as it was and Aaron Smith was at the helm, I don't think they would have had the control they had with Aaron Smith there. Whereas with TJ, he's so like pernickety and very physical, and just like doesn't shy away when he gets a hit or something early in the game. That doesn't take him out of a game. It means that he's probably going to make a game changing break in around 30 seconds. Like, he's very responsive to challenge and very abrasive as a personality, which is good, and it suits in that position, as well as being lippy, which is the norm thing for a nine. But yeah, no, his pace of game meant that even when they were losing collisions and contacts, which they were able to manipulate the Bulls enough to get around them and then get through them. Yeah, and that was like, I really do credit TJ with being the difference, because I think his game management is what allows them to do it. Yeah, and I don't think it's on Bowden, which is why the Bowden Mo'unga question gets more and more interesting with all this, because I think Bowden is a quality footballer and such a dangerous player that you have to have him on the team.
Well, an option at fullback,
and an option at fullback for sure. But as a 10, like as an out and out 10, I don't think he's the best in the world. I really don't. Like, I don't think he has all of the temperament and kind of judgment to to hold that mantle. I don't fully believe it.
Yeah. Well, you start to see that if he loses a little bit of gas, then he'll really have to work on those other elements of his game, because a lot of it is gas for Bodie. Yeah.
Well, that's it. You can paper over the, like, he has such alarming speed that he can be in a compromising position and get around it, because he's that quick.
Exactly. But TJ certainly does help him in that department, and it creates a curious picture for this week, because obviously you have the Crusaders playing against them, and the Crusaders, who did get it done against the Highlanders, a weaker Highlanders side. There was a breakdown brittleness to them that, like, you would generally have favoured Matt Todd over Artie Sevilla, but there's no question form wise that
Artie's in there now.
7.
That was to be honest, that came from a couple of years ago when Artie wasn't really playing a sevens game. He was more of a kind of a ball carrying robust number 8/number 6, and it was more of an intellectual argument for the All Blacks, in that, like, Matt Todd was getting frozen out despite being there.
It was more in opposition to Sam Cane, which he maintained.
Well, I still maintain that Sam Cane isn't an out and out number 7. Like, if you're thinking Pocock, I don't think he is. Like, he's not that kind of getting over the ball.
He is a 7. Like, you wouldn't pick him anywhere else.
Yeah, probably not. But I don't see him as, like, an elite level poacher.
No, maybe not.
Which I think a 7 should be. And I like, not that
Arnie's getting there.
Yeah, and Matt Todd, I think, is an out and out 7 who's just not quite elite level. He's club level more so.
He was frozen out of that game for the Highlanders, and the Highlanders got some purchase at breakdown. Yeah. They also exposed some cracks in the Crusaders' D. Jack Goodhue was stepped at one point to Sever Reese. There were line breaks afoot. Rob Thompson was causing them all kinds of problems from 13.
Yeah. And he's another tidy player, actually, and we kind of overlook him in the Kiwi 13.
He's gonna go to Europe in a few years and be class for whoever gets him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, no, the Highlanders did cause a lot of problems for them, and I think they're such a quality team. This season just didn't really shape up for them. They were missing. Elements. That was it. Like, they had almost all the elements.
Even
of
Josh Arani at 10 is such a young man still,
and he could grow into a fine player yet. Some of his instincts are really on point, but it's like watching like Marcus Smith for Harlequins this year, and you're thinking like, wow, there's a tidy bag of potential, and you can just see a few elements here and there in a couple of loose plays that you're like, we forgive him because he's a young man, but there's a bit more mileage needs to be got. Yeah, for sure, worth investing in. And then conversely, the opposite end of the spectrum, Ben Smith, the classy, the accountant that is, oozing class the whole game, causing problems sometimes, still making the right call more often than not, pretty much every time. And then the second he comes off to rapturous applause, Marty Banks
in at 15,
coughing up that ball. Like, as much as it was a great play from Mo'unga, who is feisty and goes for that ball. And earlier on, he got perped in a contact and came away with the ball. He was just bounced onto the ground, and there he was on the ground with the ball. And it's like, that's a good instinct.
He's become a leader in that Crusaders team. I mean, if you're looking at the difference makers, I mean, you would have thought Cody Taylor. Cody Taylor had a poor game. His line out throwing was off. The second rows weren't as big a presence. The back row wasn't as big a presence. The pack weren't, until the second half they started to get on top, but they weren't as showy as you would hope. And actually the two difference makers were, we would expect, Kieran Reid, and he had loads of nice subtle touches. He was very much a difference maker in the game. But also Richie Mo'unga at 10 was looking very much like a chiseled vet for a young man.
I think that's been one of the main hallmarks of Rodgers' tenure at the Crusaders, is just the growth in that boy. Because I remember him the season before he came, and you were thinking like,
there's potential,
but is he going to be another kind of Lima Sapwonga level player his whole career and never quite the international caliber? But
Now he's
not true. He's a shout for player of the season, and he possibly is ousting Bowden Barrett, which is something you wouldn't have said last year. And it's coming up to World Cup time, so crunch time as far as selection. He will definitely get at least 1 or 2 run-outs in the abridged rugby championship to come, and we'll see what balance works. Maybe it's him and Bowden on the pitch at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's him with Bowden to come in at 60 minutes. Who knows what the best balance for them is, but he's definitely in that conversation. He does. He plays like a little Rog now. I love his temperament on the pitch, but he's probably a bit more physical than Rog ever was. So, his footwork and his ability to break the line is great. He takes to the line
a lot, but his boot is magic as well. And got great grit and great hustle to him, and also can control a game.
Yeah, 100%.
Bryn Hall from 9 as well, also playing well.
Yeah.
They had enough in the second half. They're still a really classy team, and we're always, when we're making our critiques, grading them on a slightly different curve than, say, the Sharks and the like. You know, they're still a really classy, high-level team and likely victors. But certainly the Artie Sevilla factor makes this game more curious.
It brings it back into the balance a little bit. My fear for the Canes comes from what that Bulls side was doing to their scrum for the whole game, pretty much.
Yeah, and even around the fringes and the contact, there was a physical deficiency there.
A lot of times they were getting around them, but it was like 3 phases to get to the outside, and each phase they were caught 5 or more yards behind the gain line and driven. And you suspect that more of that's to come with the Crusaders, because you can't afford to be lacking that much in set piece to and get around the Crusaders. You won't get around them. They'll shut you down, and they will grab their tries when they're going as well. There'll be fewer loose elements that there were to the Bulls kind of game in the final kind of passage when you just need to clinically execute. There's often a little bit of the Crusaders do.
Yeah.
And so I suspect this game will probably go by the numbers, and Crusaders will probably win it by probably slightly more than 10, probably around 10 points or more.
It's a statement. The Highlanders had them on the ropes and up until, and they were for all of the Highlanders don't have the most physical pack either, but Liam Squire was putting in a serious shift, and it was all sort of derailed when Squire got that yellow card, and that was a sad end for the Highlanders, who are obviously losing so many players at the end of the season, and there's a stopgap here. There's going to be potential coming in behind it, but it was a sad moment for the Highlanders, and the Canes. When you're playing the Crusaders, you just need to stay in it for 80 minutes. You can't let up, and every time you let up, they will punish you.
Well, the Canes, because of I suspect the physical disadvantages they will have, with the few exceptions. I think Artie Sevilla will be up for the big game and up for the fight, and he'll have to get stuck in. But it'll be a matter of, are they taking their chances or not? If you see in that first 20 minutes, the Canes get one clear cut opportunity, and then a pass doesn't go to hand or something, that's very worrying, because you suspect. Eventually the pressure the Crusaders are bringing is going to tell anyway. Every point's going to count massively for the Canes.
If it becomes about the pack, it's obviously going the Crusaders' way. I mean, just looking at the second row discrepancy, I mean, you got Scott Barrett and Sam Whitelock together. There's just ruthless physicality to that. So the Canes just need to be quick. They need to be leaning on TJ, as you say, to get them out of trouble from a reversing pack, and then make it about attack. Get Lamape more into the game than he was at the weekend. Get Dane Coles on the wing in the wide channels, and get Ben Lamb into the game a bit more. Playmakers into the game.
Get the danger men on the ball.
Because the Highlanders showed that there are tries to be scored against the Crusaders.
Oh, for sure. And, they're not a flawless side at all, but they are.
And they're not actually as good as they were last year.
No, either. I don't think so either. Yeah, I think they probably slipped back one or two notches back towards the pack. Still frightening for any team going against them, and they tend to be just so well drilled and detailed out focused that they seem to be doing everything right behind the scenes as well. So that's what makes them so intimidating, is that you really struggle to see how some of these Super Rugby teams will break them down, because the detail they're putting in is kind of greater than everyone else. The balance of their team. It's funny that players like Bryn Hall are having such a stellar season, but tend not to be in the conversation for the All Black jersey, because that's Aaron Smith or TJ. And there's a lot of other players, like Goodhue being George Bridge being another. And
Goodhue has his test caps though.
He does have a few, but it's they're never really in the conversation, despite all consistently starting for what is consistently the best team.
Matt Todd is another.
And Matt Todd another example of that, and it's just they're a sum of the parts kind of thing, and more of a monster of an entity that goes beyond any player in any jersey. They just tend to collectively make good decisions and be very physical all the while.
It also helps when you have that second row, Cody Taylor, Kieran Reid,
and there's a Mwanga to direct
Crotty,
things.
There's a lot of All Blacks in there still.
No, it's true.
David Havili, fullback even.
Yeah, danger man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's still hard to see beyond the Crusaders making it 3 in a row. Yeah. Ultimately, with the way it's lined up as well, and it's still hard to see anyone doing it.
But the league table doesn't lie. They were the best side in the regular season. They won all the games. They've earned the right now to host all the way in, which is so massive in this competition.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a shock.
It would be a shock
if they lost.
But this Canes team are thoroughly capable of producing a shock, and
at least making a game of it.
Or at least making a game of it. And should, like our dream come true and the Jags actually make it to the final, they are another team who are just match up well enough to be a thorn in the side and potentially go bang bang and take a lead and make it a very different game, where the Brumbies, you feel, if the Brumbies were to get through, are just going to lose this matchup.
The matchups they've been winning, they won't.
Yeah.
And that'll be
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's in our preview, I suppose, of those two games upcoming.
Absolutely.
And we're going to enjoy the games this weekend. One of them starts tonight.
This evening. It'll be upcoming as we upload this at Irish time. That'll be Friday evening at about 11, half 11 or something. Yeah. And then obviously Irish time 8:30 in the morning tomorrow.
Or New Zealand time morning.
Yeah. Irish time 8:30 in the morning tomorrow is the other game, Crusaders Hurricanes.
Okay, right. Yes.
Canes. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much use Irish time is
to anyone, but it's more for our own clarity. Just I suppose we'll move on.
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please like down below and subscribe for more videos. And please enter the comments section to join our conversation. Thanks.